What happens when a Hollywood icon walks onto a daytime talk show expecting warmth, only to find herself staring into the eyes of someone ready to challenge her very identity? That was the question floating like a ghost above the studio lights the moment, and Hathaway stepped onto the set of The View. Before the cameras even fully captured her, something in the air shifted. An almost electric stillness, as if the audience sensed a storm building behind her gentle smile. Before we dive into what unfolded next, make sure you subscribe to Stage View right now and hit like, comment, and share, because what you're about to hear is one of the most tense and unexpected confrontations to ever hit daytime television. The applause carried and across the stage, but even then, the tension threaded through the sound, thin but unmistakable. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, arms crossed in a way that suggested curiosity, but also challenge. The kind of posture that said, "I'm ready." "Are you?" The cameras rolled. The lights locked into place. And something in Anne's eyes tightened, barely noticeable, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. She knew. She felt it. Whatever this moment would become, it was not going to be the standard Hollywood interview. "And Hathaway is here," Whoopi said with her usual calm, but there was something in her tone, something that hinted she'd already sensed where this was going. "She's starring in a new film that's already getting Oscar buzz." And thanked her politely, settling into her chair. She smoothed her dress, smiled at the crowd. It looked effortless, but only at first. Then Joy struck. "So, Anne," Joy began, her voice deceptively light, "let's talk about this new persona of yours." A ripple went through the audience, barely audible, barely visible, but it was there. A tremor. And blinked once. "My persona?" Joy tilted her head, lips curling in a way that carried both humor and accusation. "Yeah, every time you come on this show, or any show, you reinvent yourself. The sweet girl, the serious actress, the activist, the good girl Hollywood type. So tell us," she leaned in, "who's the real Anne Hathaway?" Whoopi shot her a look, a silent joy. "Really? Now?" But Joy didn't look away, and inhaled slowly. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just carefully. "I'm not sure what you mean by persona. I'm just myself." "Oh, come on," Joy said, waving a dismissive hand. "People don't buy that. People talk about you, right? The whole Anne Hathaway is fake thing." A hush fell. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, zooming in slower, quieter. The control room went still, its normally buzzing energy frozen, as if waiting for a verdict. Anne's throat tightened, but she refused to show more than the faintest shift. "I'm aware that people have opinions," she answered. "But I don't think it's fair to call someone fake, because they're trying to do their best." Joy smirked. "But you do know the reputation." A few gasps erupted from the audience. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," another person muttered. "Not again, why does she do this?" Anne's fingers curled into her dress. Not aggressively, not defensively, more like she was anchoring herself, grounding her soul against something sharp. "What reputation are you referring to, Joy?" she asked quietly. Joy shrugged. "You're polished. Too polished. People say it feels put on, like you're always acting." A flicker of pain crossed Anne's face. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just real. Real in a way that suddenly made the room feel too small. "I'm an actress," Anne said. "But that doesn't mean I'm acting every moment of my life." Joy held her gaze, unblinking. "Are you sure?" That was the moment the studio shifted. It wasn't physical. It was emotional, like a collective heartbeat suddenly skipped, and sat up straighter, her shoulders pulling back with quiet resolve. "Yes," she said. "I am sure." A few claps scattered through the audience, uncertain but supportive. But Joy didn't soften. "Then answer this honestly," she said. "Why do people feel disconnected from you?" Whoopi's eyebrows lifted sharply. Sarah and Sunny exchanged looks, half warning, half worry, and swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was fragile but firm. "Because I used to care too much about what people thought of me. I tried to be perfect. I tried to be acceptable." Her gaze flickered downward, then up again, stronger. "I learned the hard way that perfection makes people uncomfortable." Joy's eyes narrowed, not malicious but pointed. Calculated. "So you're saying it's everyone else's fault?" "No," Anne's voice didn't rise, but it solidified. "I'm saying I'm human, Joy." For the first time, Joy's expression changed, not to softness, but to something more complex. Something like surprise. The audience watched breathlessly, and continued, gently but with unmistakable strength. "Do you know what it feels like to have strangers dissect your smile? To call your laugh annoying? To decide you're insincere because you're enthusiastic or nervous or trying too hard. I've lived with that for years. A sympathetic murmur passed through the studio. Joy stayed quiet, and that silence felt louder than her questions, and leaned forward just slightly. I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be. But I work hard. I love deeply. I care about the world. And if that looks polished, then maybe that's because I've had to learn how to protect myself. The audience applauded, stronger this time, more unified. But Joy's eyes locked onto something else. Something deeper. So you're finally admitting it, she said softly, almost too softly. That you put on armor. Anne's breath trembled just once. Everyone does, she whispered. The room froze. Joy opened her mouth again, but this time Whoopi cut in. Joy. Enough. Joy's jaw tightened, but she didn't continue, and exhaled, her shoulders easing by a millimeter. But the danger wasn't gone. It was only waiting, lurking behind unasked questions and unresolved tensions. What the viewers didn't know, what no one expected, was that this was only the beginning. Joy hadn't even touched the real reason she'd been waiting for Anne. The tension that sparked these questions was not random. It had history, depth, a story buried behind years of industry whispers. And when Joy finally brought it up, when she pressed on the one thing and had never spoken about publicly, the entire studio would go silent. Because what Anne Hathaway said next would not only expose Joy Behar, it would expose the entire dynamic of The View. And no one was prepared. And sat there in the thickening silence, her breath soft but steady, her eyes glimmering with a storm she was trying desperately to contain. Joy Behar hadn't broken eye contact once. Not since the moment she first fired that accusation across the table. It was as if she'd been waiting years for this exchange, for this exact moment, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. But Anne sensed it. Everyone sensed it. The real confrontation hadn't even started. A stage manager signaled for a light adjustment, and while the camera angles quietly shifted, the audience fidgeted. People leaned forward. A few folded their arms, bracing themselves. Even the crew in the control room, usually detached and clinical, felt their chests tighten. Whoopi cleared her throat. Let's keep it moving. But Joy wasn't done. So, Joy said, her tone deceptively casual, since we're being honest today, I think it's time we talk about something that's been floating around for a while. She rested her elbow on the table, leaning in. Your reputation in Hollywood. And slowly looked up, her expression unreadable for one heartbeat, too. My reputation? Joy nodded once, eyes sharp as glass. Yes. The whispers. The rumors. The reason some people say they avoid working with you. A wave of shock swept through the audience. Gasps so loud it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Several people shook their heads, others covered their mouths. Sunny shifted in her chair, uneasy. Sarah looked horrified. Whoopi's jaw clenched. Joy didn't blink. Anne's fingers stilled completely, frozen on her lap. And what exactly have you heard, Joy? Oh, don't make me spell it out, Joy said. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Anne's lips parted, but her breath caught before she could speak. Because she did know. She had spent years pretending not to hear it, pretending not to feel it. The criticism, the mockery, the misinterpretations that swallowed her alive. Joy leaned back slightly, giving a laugh with no humor in it. People say you're difficult. The word cracked like a whip. Difficult, and repeated softly. High maintenance. Emotional. Sensitive. Joy raised a brow. A diva, actually. The studio reacted like a single body. Gasps, murmurs, a few stunned shouts from the back rows. Someone whispered, "That's so unfair." Another voice. "She's not like that," and blinked rapidly, and for a moment, just a flicker, her composure broke. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a Hollywood way. But in the way of someone who thought they'd toughened up enough, only to realize a word could still cut. Joy, Whoopi warned under her breath. But Joy kept going. You've heard the criticism, Joy said. I know you have. And honestly, I think the public wants to hear you address it. Straight. No acting. No media training. Just Anne. And stared at her. Her face softened, but also somehow hardened all at once, like someone choosing whether to run or stand their ground. Then she took a slow, quiet breath. I'm emotional, and said. Yes. Her voice trembled only slightly. I'm sensitive. Absolutely. I feel deeply, I care deeply, I love deeply. And for some reason, in this industry, that makes you a problem. The audience hummed with empathy. But I am not a diva, and continued. I am not cruel. And I am not fake. I have never treated anyone badly on a set. I work hard. I show up early. I take responsibility. And if people call that difficult, she paused, her eyes burning with something fierce and human, then that says more about them than me. Joy's eyes narrowed, as if processing the unexpected strength with which Anne answered. But Anne didn't back down. And by the way, she added, leaning in ever so slightly, being emotional is not a flaw. Being sensitive is not a weakness. Being human is not an inconvenience. A thunder of applause erupted from the audience. But Joy wasn't satisfied. Oh, come on, she scoffed. Anne, don't pretend you're some delicate little flower. You've had your moments. We all saw the speech at the Oscars. We saw the interviews. The crying, the shaking voice. Joy, Sonny cut in, that's not fair. Come on. Joy waved her off. No, I'm serious. There's a reason people say she overacts even in interviews. The crowd gasped again. This time Anne's eyes closed for a heartbeat, just long enough for a crack of emotion to show. When she opened them, something inside her had changed. Something had surfaced. I remember that night, Anne said, her voice suddenly low and steady. I remember the nerves. I remember the pressure. I was 28. I was overwhelmed. I was terrified. And I was grateful. Joy blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in tone. And the world mocked me for it, and continued. For being too happy, too emotional, too sincere. I spent years apologizing for existing, for feeling, for caring, for trying. Her voice warmed, strengthened. But I'm done apologizing. The studio erupted again, the applause louder, longer. Joy didn't clap. Her eyes hardened, her posture stiffening. Okay, she said slowly, so let's talk about why you really stopped coming on this show for years. The audience froze. Even the air refused to move. And swallowed once, jaw tightening. Joy! Oh no, Joy said, pointing a finger. You don't get to dance around this one. Something happened. And you avoiding this show for 7 years wasn't random. Sarah looked stunned. Sonny looked away. Whoopi looked furious. Anne's breath hitched, not in fear, but in recognition. The truth behind Joy's words hit something deep, something she thought she'd buried. Joy leaned forward, voice dropping lower, almost like a dare. Tell them why you didn't want to come back. The room felt like the inside of a drum, tight, vibrating, ready to split open. Anne's chest rose as she inhaled deeply, the kind of breath a person takes before jumping from a cliff. She looked out at the crowd, their eager eyes searching her face, searching for the truth she had held for years. Her gaze slowly returned to Joy, soft but steady. Do you really want me to say it? Joy didn't flinch. Go ahead, and nodded once. Fine. A hush fell so deep that even the cameras stopped humming. You insulted me, and said. Years ago. Backstage. Right before we went live. Every head whipped toward Joy. Joy's face stiffened. Anne, you mocked my voice, and continued. You mocked my laugh. You told me I sounded like a theater kid trying too hard to be liked. Joy's jaw locked. Anne's voice lowered. And you knew I heard you. The audience gasped so loudly the stage shuddered. Joy swallowed but didn't speak. And wasn't done. I walked onto that stage that day holding back tears, she said, her voice trembling now not from weakness, but from the weight of unspoken truth. And when people later called me fake, when they picked apart my smile, my tone, my enthusiasm, they had no idea that minutes before that interview, someone on your panel made me feel small. Several audience members shouted, wow. Others murmured angrily. Joy's eyes flashed with something. Anger? Guilt? Denial? It was hard to tell. That wasn't me, Joy snapped quietly, and looked at her without blinking. It was. The tension snapped like a rope. The studio burst into a low roar, shock, outrage, disbelief. Joy pressed her palms flat on the table, trying to maintain control. Okay, Joy said sharply. You're twisting it. I make jokes. That's what I do. Jokes are supposed to be funny, Anne said. Not humiliating. The room exploded in applause, but the emotion swirling between Anne and Joy was raw, unresolved, electric. It wasn't personal, Joy insisted. It felt personal, Anne replied. It still does. Joy looked away, jaw working. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. Anne exhaled shakily, her hand trembling slightly as she rested it on the table. I didn't come back because I didn't feel safe here. Gasps. Whispers. Someone in the audience said, That's terrible. Joy's eyes darted toward the cameras, then back to Anne, her expression stiffening into something colder. "You're making me into a villain," and shook her head. "No, I'm telling the truth." The tension was now a living thing, writhing, pulsing, filling every inch of the studio. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, and added, "And that's what you never expected." Joy stared at her, an unreadable storm behind her eyes. The studio was frozen. But the real explosion, the moment that would send shockwaves through social media, headlines, and Hollywood, was still coming. Because Joy Behar was about to snap. And what she said next would change everything. Joy Behar sat stiffly, her shoulders locked, her jaw set in a way the audience had never seen. For years, she had been the unshakable one. The comic, the cynic, the sharp wit who danced through tension like it was part of the job description. But this accusation, spoken aloud on national television by someone as respected and beloved as in Hathaway, it cracked something. A tremor of noise ran through the audience, an uneasy, swirling whisper of disbelief, sympathy, outrage, confusion. People shifted in their seats, eyes darting between and in joy like they were watching a glass tower fracture from the inside. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Then Joy inhaled sharply, the sound sharp enough to break the silence. "So that's what this is," she said, her voice low but edged with steel. "You came here today to what? Punish me? Make a spectacle?" The sudden defensiveness struck like a bolt of lightning, and leaned back slightly, surprised by the intensity rising behind Joy's eyes. "Joy, I came here to talk about my film. You're the one who pushed this." Joy scoffed, shaking her head. "Oh, please. You've been waiting to say that for years." Sunny lifted a hand, trying to interject. "Joy, maybe we should just breathe." Joy raised a finger sharply. No, we're doing this." The audience went dead quiet, and swallowed, her spine straightening as if bracing for impact. "I didn't want to bring it up." "Oh, but you did," Joy shot back. "You absolutely did. And you know what? Fine. If you want to expose me, go ahead. But don't pretend you're doing this for healing or honesty. You're doing this for the cameras." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Anne's eyes widened, genuinely hurt. "That's not true. Isn't it?" Joy pressed. "You're talking about something from 10 years ago. 10 years. You could have addressed this any time privately. But here you are, on a talk show with millions watching, trying to get sympathy." Whoopi shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. "Joy, don't joy me," Joy said, holding up her hand. "I'm sick of people acting like I'm the villain every time someone doesn't like my jokes." Anne's voice came quieter, steadier. "It wasn't a joke to me." Joy laughed, a short, harsh sound. "You take everything seriously. That's the whole problem." The audience murmured in disapproval, and blinked rapidly, her breath faltering for a moment. Her composure, so carefully built, cracked at the edges. But then something steadied inside her. She folded her hands, lifting her chin with slow, deliberate grace. "Joy," she said softly, "you don't get to decide how your words affected me." Joy's lips parted, stunned, and continued, voice trembling but resolute. "You may have thought it was harmless, but to me it hurt. It made me question myself. It made me feel foolish. And when the world called me fake or annoying or over the top, I wondered if they were seeing something I couldn't. Something you had seen." For a moment, Joy wavered. It was small, almost imperceptible, but her eyes shifted downward, just for a sliver of a second. But that vulnerability vanished quickly. "So what?" Joy countered. "You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry. There. Happy." The apology was flat, hollow, a cardboard imitation of remorse, and stared at her, searching her face for sincerity. She didn't find it. "You're not sorry," and whispered. Joy tensed. "Don't tell me what I feel." Sunny exhaled sharply, frustration finally spilling over. "Joy, come on. This isn't you. You're not even trying to understand what she's saying." Joy's eyes snapped to Sunny. "I don't need a lecture." Whoopi slammed her hand lightly on the table, not angry, but demanding attention. "Everyone take a breath. We're getting off the rails here." But rails were the last thing anyone was thinking about. This wasn't a show anymore. It was a reckoning. And turned back to Joy, her voice calm, almost tender. "I didn't say this to punish you. I said it because you asked why I never came back. Because you pushed. Because you wanted honesty." "Oh, please," Joy muttered. "You're a professional. Toughen up." Anne's eyes flashed with something fierce. Being tough doesn't mean being numb. And being sensitive doesn't mean being weak. That line hit the room like a shockwave. Applause erupted instantly, loud, emotional, overwhelming. Several audience members even stood. Joy flinched at the sound. When the clapping finally died down and continued quietly, and maybe, just maybe, people didn't connect with me because I spent so much time trying to be what you told me I wasn't. Joy blinked, startled, and held her gaze. Maybe your words stuck with me more than they should have. For the first time since the confrontation began, Joy faltered. Her expression softened. Not fully, not outwardly, but for a fraction of a second something unsettled her. A crack in the armor. Then she straightened, her voice hardening once more. Look, Anne, I say things. I tease. I poke. But I don't mean harm. If I hurt you, fine. I'll own that. But don't sit here and act like I ruined your life. And shook her head. You didn't ruin anything. But you mattered. More than you knew. The truth hung in the air, heavy, honest, undeniably raw. And looked down at her hands, inhaling slowly, allowing the emotion to settle before she spoke again. When you're sensitive, she said softly, you don't just hear insults. You memorize them. You live with them. They echo. And when someone you admire, or someone who has a platform, says something cutting, it doesn't just scrape your skin. It sinks in. Joy's eyes flickered, not with anger now, but something quieter. Something like recognition. But then, just as the room felt on the brink of a breakthrough, the tension snapped in the opposite direction. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. Well, maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you take everything too personally. The audience groaned. Someone shouted, Come on, Joy. Another yelled, That's not fair. And shoulders fell, barely, but enough for the room to feel it. She looked at Joy for a long, aching moment. I take things personally, and said, because I have a heart. For a moment, a breathtaking, fragile moment, Joy's face showed something like vulnerability, or regret, or fear. It was impossible to name. But then the cameras zoomed in. The studio lights brightened. The pressure re-entered like a tidal wave. Joy clenched her jaw again, retreating deeper into defensiveness. And that's when it happened. The snap. The moment that would replay on social media 1,000 times. The moment that would ignite headlines across the country. Joy leaned forward, eyes blazing, and said, You know what? You're too sensitive for this show. Maybe you don't belong here. The audience gasped so loudly the studio shook. And froze. Her eyes widened, hurt, shock, disbelief blooming across her face in one painful instant. Sunny covered her mouth. Sarah whispered, Oh my God. Whoopi stared at Joy in stunned silence. For one suspended heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. Then and spoke, quietly, painfully, with a strength she didn't know she had. Maybe I don't belong here, she said. But that doesn't mean you did the right thing. And the room exploded. Applause. Shouts. Gasps. A storm of emotion crashed through the studio, shaking every wall. Joy stared back at Anne, her expression a tangle of something dark and defensive. But Anne was not done, because in part 4 she would rise. And Joy would face consequences no one expected. The aftermath would be brutal, explosive, and unforgettable. The studio was no longer a studio. It was a storm of voices, emotions, hands flying toward mouths, eyes widening in disbelief. The audience reacted like a single heartbeat punched into chaos, half of them shouting in disbelief at Joy's words, the other half clapping fiercely for Anne's courage. Producers rushed to the edges of the stage. Stage managers exchanged frantic looks. A camera operator muttered, Oh my God, under his breath as he tried to keep the frame steady. But at the center of it all, 2 figures sat frozen. Anne Hathaway, Joy Behar. One stunned, one bracing. Anne's breath trembled once, just once, before her expression shifted. It was subtle at first, like a quiet flame growing behind her eyes. She didn't look furious or broken. She looked awakened. Joy, on the other hand, blinked rapidly, as if realizing too late the gravity of what she'd said. The applause, the gasps, the rumble of voices. It all blurred into a fog until Whoopi slammed her hand onto the table with enough force to make several audience members jump. All right, enough. The room fell silent instantly. Whoopi's eyes were fiery, something rarely seen, reserved only for moments that demanded absolute authority. We're not doing this, she said, each word slicing through the tension. Not like this. Not on this show. Joy pressed her lips together, defiant but shaken, and looked down at her hands, folding them slowly as she waited. Whoopi turned to Anne first. You didn't deserve that. Anne's head lifted, surprise flickering across her face. Then Whoopi turned to Joy. And you know better. The audience exhaled in one stunned wave. Joy's jaw clenched. She wasn't used to being publicly corrected on her own show. Not like this. Not by Whoopi, who rarely took sides so directly. But she said nothing. For a long, thick moment, the only sound was the hum of hot studio lights. Then Anne looked up, and her voice, soft but unmistakably firm, cut through the room. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I didn't come here to expose anyone. I came here because I've spent years trying to prove myself to people who decided who I was before they met me. Her gaze swept across the audience, gentle but piercing, emotional but composed. I let strangers define me. I let their opinions shape how I showed up in the world. And for a long time, I lost myself. People nodded. A few wiped tears. But today, Anne's voice grew, steady as a rising tide. Today I remembered something. I don't owe anyone perfection. I don't owe anyone a performance. I owe myself honesty. The applause began softly, then grew into something powerful, real, emotional, unified. Anne inhaled slowly, savoring the sound, letting it wash over her like redemption. Then she turned to Joy. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with clarity. I'm sensitive, Anne said. And I'm proud of that. My sensitivity makes me a better actor, a better friend, a better person. And I'm sorry if that makes people uncomfortable. Joy's eyes flickered. Anger, regret, confusion, all battling for space. And continued. But I won't apologize for who I am anymore. Not today. Not ever again. The crowd roared. Joy swallowed hard. For the first time, she looked small. Not because Anne diminished her, but because Anne rose above her. The camera zoomed in on Joy's expression. Uncertain, unsteady, shaken by a truth she had avoided for years. Sunny leaned over and placed a gentle hand on Anne's arm. Thank you for saying that, she whispered. Sarah nodded vigorously. That needed to be heard. Joy stared at the table, blinking quickly, her breathing shallow. Her voice, when it came, was quieter, no jokes, no bravado. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, not lifting her eyes. And nodded once. I believe you. But she didn't say she forgave her. Forgiveness wasn't something you forced. It was something earned. The show attempted to move on, producers signaling, Whoopi smoothing her tone, Sunny directing the conversation into safer territory. But the air in the room had transformed. The energy was heavier, realer. Everyone knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. When the segment ended and the cameras cut to commercial, the studio remained silent for several seconds. Silent in a way that said everyone was processing what had just unfolded. And stood from her chair slowly. Joy remained seated, staring at her hands. The audience watched as Anne approached Joy. Not with rage, not with triumph, but with something gentler. She extended her hand. Joy looked at it, stunned, and said only one sentence. We all deserve grace. Joy's eyes filled, just slightly, before she took the hand. The contact was brief. Fragile, but real. The audience erupted in applause once more, this time warmer, fuller, as if the room itself exhaled in relief. When Anne walked off stage, she did so with a dignity that shimmered like light trailing behind her. Cameras caught her calm smile, her steady posture, her quiet strength. But Joy stayed behind. Head bowed, face unreadable, shoulders shifted by the weight of a moment she couldn't joke her way out of. By the time the clip reached social media, it detonated like an emotional bomb. Millions watched Anne's brave admission. Millions watched Joy's cutting remark. Millions watched the aftermath unfold in real time. Within hours, hashtags trended across platforms. Hashtag Anne Hathaway deserves better. Hashtag Joy Behar out of line. Hashtag The View Meltdown. Hashtag Anne speaks truth. TikTok filled with edits of Anne's calm but devastating lines. Twitter/X exploded with debates, outrage, think pieces. Instagram Reels replayed Joy's words with dramatic music overlays. Late-night hosts joked. Celebrities weighed in. Fans wrote paragraphs of support. And for the first time in years, Anne Hathaway's public persona wasn't being torn apart. It was being understood. Because people saw her, really saw her. Her pain, her courage, her vulnerability, her humanity. And they loved her for it. The next morning, headlines glowed across news sites. Anne Hathaway confronts Joy Behar in raw, emotional moment on The View. Abrupt silence falls over studio after Joy's comment to Anne. Anne Hathaway's honesty breaks the internet. Joy Behar faces backlash after tense exchange with Oscar winner. Even industry insiders chimed in, revealing stories of Anne's kindness, professionalism, warmth, painting a picture far different from the tired old rumors. And Hathaway had risen above the noise. Not by fighting, not by attacking, but by telling the truth. And Joy Behar, whether she admitted it or not, had been changed by the moment. The world watched. The world felt it. And the world wasn't going to forget. And Hathaway walked away from that day not as a reinvented persona, not as a curated image, but as something she had always been, just rarely allowed to show. A human being with a heart too big to hide. And that heart, it won. If you're watching this right now, I want to hear from you. Whose side were you on in that pivotal moment? Was Joy out of line? Did and say exactly what the world needed to hear? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. And don't forget to subscribe to Stage View for more dramatic, emotional, cinematic breakdowns of the biggest celebrity moments and TV confrontations happening today. This is Stage View, and the story is far from over.